This is episode 98 of the Death to Tyrants podcast.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquids, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Death to Tyrants podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of a shelter-in-place version of Austin, Texas. Yes, we now have that upon us. It sounds funny to say shelter-in-place like there's a bomb coming our way. Basically, it means that my barber cannot cut my hair. There's going to be black market haircuts coming soon. I can guarantee you that. Anyways, I told you guys the next several episodes of this podcast would be focused on many aspects of life surrounding the coronavirus, this wild moment that we're in. And today, I've got someone from across the pond. Is Michael Cheney of the Michael Cheney Show. And we're going to talk about what it's like in the UK with this stuff. Gun laws over there, the healthcare system over there. Bernie Sanders wants a very similar model of healthcare here. Well, how's it working for them? How's it been working for them prior to the coronavirus pandemic and what it's like now? We get into all of that stuff because, I told you guys I want to do a deep dive into many aspects of the coronavirus craziness, we'll call it. And if you want to hear someone just repeat conventional talking points like, hey, just stay home, or it's just like the flu, you can, probably look at your Facebook timeline or turn on Fox or CNN. I want to get into this topic a little bit deeper than the surface of a puddle. So we're going to do that today. Like I said, my guest is Michael Cheney. He's a libertarian, entrepreneur, and podcaster. During the 20 years he's been running his own business, the government over there has stolen millions of dollars from him in, you guessed it, taxation. The final straw was when his father passed away and the government stole $175,000 from his estate in taxes. His transformation to anti-state libertarian was then complete. And he's with us today on Death to Tyrants. Michael Cheney, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Buck.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. Where are you, actually? And I guess, what's it like over there during this crazy time?
So I'm in close to the Highlands of Scotland, obviously the top of the UK. And yeah, it's kind of surreal like it is, I guess, most places at the moment. I was just reading this morning, I think it's quarter of the world's population at the moment is under some kind of lockdown, and we're no different here in the UK. They put a SMS text message out yesterday to every member of the population in this country saying stay at home unless you have an essential, you're an essential health worker or you're going out for medicine or food, or we can go out once a day now for exercise. That's it.
Wow. Okay. Then that's actually, I'm in Austin, Texas. That is quite a bit more strict than we have it here.
Right.
The lockdown, I guess they're calling it shelter in place, came down yesterday as I record this. And it was interesting because a lot of people are looking at it going, so what's different then? And the main difference is that nail salons, hair salons, kind of businesses they consider not essential can't be open. Otherwise,
right.
It actually specified in there, you can still go exercise, you can still run around tracks and walk your dog and this kind of thing. So I thought, so as long as I'm not running around licking doorknobs or something, I guess we're good. Did the UK handle this differently at first? It seemed like I saw news that, again, this is happening so quickly and there's news up to the minute basically that changes. But did the UK handle it differently initially?
Yeah, they did. I mean, they were handling it different to every country pretty much. And people were panicking over here that obviously, particularly people that kind of just swear by mainstream media were getting extremely frustrated and worried about the situation here in the UK because they were very slow to react. What the Prime Minister here said is he was making his decisions based on science rather than politics, which I thought was interesting. So they have a huge scientific team, and every time the Prime Minister speaks, pretty much, which is, daily on TV now, he is backed with, on either side by a member of the scientific community normally, and it's them that is driving the actual decisions here. So they were claiming to begin with that they weren't locking down, they weren't shutting down, they weren't shutting schools down, for example. It seemed like they were doing that a lot slower than some European countries in terms of a number of days after the first case was spotted. UK seemed to be pretty slow on that. Obviously, there's conspiracy theories surrounding all of these things. I know certainly from a school closure point of view, closing the schools would mean a drop in GDP, obviously production output for the country as a whole, by I think 3 or 4%. So they were reluctant to do that unless they felt that they had to, which they have now done. But yeah, they were certainly slower than some of the other European countries, which are arguably worse off and further along the curve than the UK is. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and if that backfires.
Did the change come about basically now that you're saying they've switched to you can leave your house once a day? What brought about that change?
Well, this is something I've kind of noticed with the terminology and the language. I mean, that the language is very, very, it's fascinating to me, the language surrounding this whole thing. I mean, you mentioned yourself about this idea of shelter in place. They've talked recently here in the UK about the shielded. These are the people that have got to stay at home. They cannot leave the house even for exercise, and they're calling them the shielded, not the imprisoned, but the shielded. So they're trying to switch this as if it's something that we're deciding. They call it self-isolation. We recommend that you self-isolate. Well, it's not really about me and myself, is it, if you're telling me to do it? But yeah, there's kind of 3 phases to this. The first phase is they ask people, and that's what happened to begin with. Please can you, minimize contact, social distance, not go outside unless you have to. That didn't work. Most people just thought, well, it can't be that serious, but I'm just going to go about my daily business. The second thing that happened, and this is happening in every country, and it's interesting to see in different countries and indeed, obviously, in the US, in different states where people are at. Phase 2 is they tell you. So they ramp it up a little bit and say, well, we're not asking you now. We're telling you that you must stay at home. This is very serious, and you must stay at home and must comply. What happened in the UK over the weekend just gone is people still didn't comply. They certainly didn't comply when they were asked. I mean, most people did, but there was millions who didn't. They then told them, and more people then complied, but still there were those that didn't because it wasn't a law and there was nothing in power or in force to stop them. So over the weekend, people went out en masse, and from what you've said, this sounds like where it's at in Austin, Texas. People did the only thing really that's left available to them, which is to enjoy the countryside, because frankly, there's not much else that you can do outside at the moment when all the shops and entertainment and bars and cinemas and restaurants and gyms and whatever shut. So that's what happened in the UK. People went to parks in their masses because they weren't being told not to. They were being told to, yes, stay at home, but you can get outdoors for exercise. So they did what they were within their rights to do that. And now they've obviously seen that and they've made the change to phase 3. They've gone from phase 1 asking, phase 2 telling, phase 3 enforcing. And over the weekend here in Scotland, there were some pubs that were still opening. Despite being told to shut, they remained open to try and get more business. They were dropping their prices and selling, pints of beer for ridiculous cheap amounts to try and get some money in before the inevitable shutdown. Over the weekend, the government switched to phase 3, which is enforcing, and they passed laws which mean police can now go around to pubs and actually force them to close. Just yesterday evening, I saw a story which I reposted on Facebook. This is incredible. Somebody was having a barbecue yesterday, and the police broke up the barbecue. They went round and told people to disperse, and they kicked over the barbecue. And I've actually seen the picture of it. It was on BBC News. And that's where we're at. We're at the enforced stage, phase 3. Obviously, this phase itself has many sub-stages. It's okay saying they can enforce it. They've got some laws that they've passed already. They passed a coronavirus bill just this week in the UK, which enables many, many powers for police. It also passes things that have, in my opinion, very little to do with coronavirus, like people who are mentally ill being able to be sent to institutions with just one doctor having to sign it off rather than the usual two. So things like this are going to impact people in a negative way. But there'll be many subphases of this enforcement. At the moment we're seeing laws passed very quickly. We're seeing police trying to deal with this new situation and now wading into people's personal, private life and breaking up gatherings, fining people. And I guess the next stage is the natural progression of this is, armed forces on the street.
There's kind of maybe a reputation. I don't know if it's well earned or not. I'll ask you this. Over here in America, at least, there's a reputation of the Europeans that they seem much more they will much more quickly acquiesce to what the government asks them to do. Do you think that's correct, or is that a misinterpretation?
I think it is correct. I think, as far as a generalization can be correct, I think it's correct. Yeah. I think historically, the way that a lot of the European nations have been founded and developed and grown over time, there is this inbuilt, as you say, acquiescence or just resignation that there is no other way. There's no different way. There isn't there isn't a path to freedom. There is, we must do what the government says. There's no questioning of it. Anybody that questions it is basically a borderline terrorist over here. We don't have this inbuilt constitution like you guys do. We don't have this sort of inbuilt sense of liberty and freedom and, personal kind of freedom. It's not built within us. It's not taught in our schools or anything like that. It's not part of our national anthem. Our national anthem is God Save the Queen. It's all about the monarch and the power and the ruler and the leader. So, yeah, I think what you said there is true. And I know that from speaking to people personally about these kind of things when I'm saying, trying to plant seeds of doubt in their mind and trying to get them to be a bit more questioning of what they're seeing rather than just take it as whole and take it as read, that, yeah, it's frowned upon. People just don't get it. They think you're some kind of, inverted commas, got speech marks, anarchist, as in, not an anarchist as you and I would describe it, but an anarchist as in, let's destroy civilization and, go shoot everybody. That's what people think. That's what people over here tend to think you are if you kind of question the government. Obviously, we're not all like that. There are a number of people that have started to wake up and see the picture. But I mean, it's just testament to it, with these changes, how readily people are to accept the official story, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I'm a musician and I was on tour, doing a tour over there, gosh, a long time ago now. And I had a book by Harry Brown called Why Government Doesn't Work. And one of my European friends saw it and he was aghast. He was like, what? Why would you... like I was reading the Satanic Bible or something like that.
Mein Kampf or something.
Yeah. He was just in shock, and it kind of hit me like, wow, the bowing down to government over here is a bit different than even in the States, where we unfortunately have quite a bit of that as well. I want to ask you about the healthcare system there, because one of the things we're hearing over here is that one of the big dangers with this coronavirus maybe isn't even the virus itself, but it's that the demands will overwhelm the healthcare system. And how is the system there more broadly at this point? We'll get into the specifics. How is the system there handling the demands?
It is not coping well. I mean, it wasn't coping well prior to this. This is the sad thing, really, is that the health system over here was in a state of disrepair, really, even before the coronavirus, shenanigans started kicking off. I mean, the huge waiting list. It takes you several months to get many surgeries in the UK. A lot of people are being left in corridors on the gurneys. There's not enough beds for people. I'll tell you a personal story, and then I can get into the details and the data to actually back up these claims in a second. But my personal story is I've got a health issue ongoing at the moment. Hopefully it's nothing serious, but it is something that I needed to see a consultant. I need to see a specialist, not just an ordinary doctor, but somebody who specializes in this area. And I went first off to my doctors, obviously through the National Health Service. Now, you can get to see a doctor fairly quickly, obviously not at the moment, but ordinarily you can get to see a doctor fairly quickly, sometimes on the same day. And many people say, this is great. You've got this National Health Service, it's free, you can go and see a doctor, that's awesome. Well, it's not free. Obviously, nothing is free if it's done by the government, because every dollar they spend is a dollar they've stolen from us. Now, on average, in the UK, the cost of the health service to an individual in the UK is something of the order of around $5,200. It costs $174 billion a year to run the health service over here. And there are approximately 33 million people in the UK that are working and therefore taxed. So it's not free. It's on average, it's $5,200 a year. Now, add to that, obviously, if you earn more, if you're more successful, if you've built up your career, if you run a business like I have, and I've risked a lot and sacrificed a lot over the 20 years that I've been running my own business, I've been fortunate to make a lot of money by doing that. Personally, every year I pay $30,000 for the health service. The government sent me an email a few weeks ago breaking down every cent of the tax that they stole from me last year, telling me where they'd sent it all, and $30,000 of it that they took from me, from my money that I'd earned, was put into the health system. So when I go and see that doctor, which might be once or twice a year, it's costing me $30,000 plus the $5,000. On average, that's the average that people are paying. Obviously, it's costing me $30,000, so I'm paying a little bit over the odds, being punished for my success with my business. If it worked and if it was a quick service, that would still be bad. But unfortunately, it doesn't work, and it's not a quick service. If I went to the doctor and said, with this problem, it's a digestive problem that I've got. I won't get into the details; it's a bit gruesome. But if I went to the doctors with this problem and said, "Okay, when can somebody see me?" it would have taken possibly 3 to 4 months for me to be seen by a consultant. I can't wait that long. I don't want to wait that long. Health's important. Unfortunately, because I've been successful with my business, I'm able to pay more. So what I end up doing is I actually buy private medical insurance, like many people do in the States. So I'm paying twice because I actually want care given to me when I need it, not several months down the line. So what I do is I go to my doctor and say, look, I've got private insurance, and he fast tracks it. So what happened is I saw the doctor initially, he diagnosed it, said, yeah, well, let's get more tests. This is the consultant, the specialist you need to go see. If you don't have insurance, it's going to take you 3 months. If you do have insurance, you can get this through a private consultant, and you can do that in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, I took that route. I'm paying about $100 to $120 a month for my private medical insurance. So that's obviously an additional $1,200 a month that I'm paying. So I'm now paying $31,200 a month for healthcare. Now it gets even more twisted. Okay, if we stopped here right at this point, it would be bad enough. But now I have to go and see this consultant. When I go to see this consultant, quite often, these private consultants, it's in the evening. And you might think, that's kind of weird. Why are these guys working in the evening? They're working in the evening because it's the same doctor who's working in the National Health Service. It's exactly the same individual that I would have seen if I waited 3 months. The reason that they're working in the evening is because they're not getting paid enough in the National Health Service, so they have to moonlight in the evening and take this private medical work to augment their salaries. And they're already doing 12-hour shifts, many of these guys, for the National Health Service. So it kind of shows you where the situation is. And as I say, it would be really bad even if we stopped there, but it gets even worse because the system as a whole doesn't really work. As I say, there's huge shortages. They did an interview, this was in 2017, as the Royal College of Nursing did a big survey of all its nursing and all other kinds of staff in the system. It surveyed 30,000 staff. And they basically said, look, there's huge problems. Patients are dying on their own because there's not enough staff to care for them. Patients are being left in pain because nurses are too busy. Child patients going without food because staff had to prioritize treatment. Patients not being moved, putting them at risk of bed sores. Patients left in corridors because all the beds were full, and so on. This is before the coronavirus. So you can only imagine what is happening to the health system right now. Just over the past 24 hours, they put out a call to get 250,000 volunteers to help with the National Health Service. They've also put out a recall for retired staff to come back to work. So people that have already retired from the health service and currently putting their feet up have received a call. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Please come back to work. We need you. They've also taken a arena in London where I went to a Tony Robbins event a few years ago. It can house probably quite easily 10,000 people. They've taken this arena and they've converted it into a hospital to try and provide new beds.
Wow.
So they are as swamped could be right now. And I think, as you rightly say, and this is putting, trying to, for us, people that are questioning that the mainstream narrative is to try and join the dots because nobody else is doing it for us. My gut feel on this is that is the main issue here. I personally don't feel, from all the information that I've read and from a piece that I read over the weekend from the chief medical officer here in the UK, who basically said they do not know to what extent any of the deaths have been caused by coronavirus. So the deaths that they're reporting each day, somebody has died. That's a fact. They had coronavirus. That is also a fact. Mm-hmm. Did coronavirus cause it? We don't know. Did it contribute to it in some way? We don't know. They literally don't know. And this is the chief medical officer who's driving all the strategy and policy in the UK. So, it kind of makes you think what's actually going on. My gut feel is that this is something that is taking older people before their time, maybe only days, weeks, or months, but it's accelerating the people that would be dying within this 12-month period anyway. It's condensing that into a short period, which would overload the system and obviously then lead to indirect deaths for people that couldn't get urgent surgery that's got nothing to do with COVID-19. I think that's what's happening. It's a guess. They're not telling us information, and all their decisions are based on missing data at the moment. They don't know the extent to which the coronavirus has caused the death of the individuals that we're seeing. I mean, in the UK, there are 600,000 people who die every year from old age and related, conditions due to age. And at the moment, we don't know how many of the deaths that they're telling us about every day would be in that 600,000. And when I say we don't know, even the chief medical officer has admitted that they do not know that if these deaths would have occurred anyway. So it could be zero. They literally could just be telling us every day these are the deaths of people that would have died anyway. So it's like reporting on, just people dying from old age every day. It's unlikely, but again, it's possible. They don't know. Or it could be all of them, or it could be, which is, I guess, most likely somewhere in between. But they're shaping their whole policy and all this lockdown and everything else, and huge wide sweeping changes and laws and bills and everything else that they're putting in place on information which is, totally lacking in the fundamental data that you need, which is how many of these deaths have been caused, or what is the direct link to coronavirus.
Now, you said you pay monthly for your own private health insurance outside of the system that's in place for everyone there. And the number you quoted actually doesn't sound too expensive. How common is it for people there to do exactly what you're doing?
It's not that common to pay for private healthcare, to be honest. It's kind of a luxury that that some people are able to afford. Most people don't have it. It's just not something they can stretch to. I know comparatively to you guys in the US, it's a fairly low figure. But yeah, in the UK, it's just not something that people do. It's just not something that they do. They just think, well, I've got the health service, it's free, I'll use that. That's most people's mentality. We've got this great free health service. I trust it. Let's just use that. Why would I pay more? But I think when you have a serious issue, or you have something that could be concerning you or whatever, and you actually try and go through this system and you experience it firsthand, if you have the funds, you would not look back. You would definitely go private healthcare. But most people are not in a position to do that. Most people don't have. This is per person, by the way. That's not family. So obviously, I've got it's myself, my wife, my kids. It soon racks up.
Right.
And again, most people don't have several $100s extra every month just to throw on this when they could be seen anyway. In their mind, they're already getting it.
Yeah, well, as you probably know, in the far left corners of the Democratic Party here, we've got people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren that are basically pushing for what they're calling Medicare for all. It's interesting because where some of the differences come in is that some of them want us to still be able to have our private insurance, and then some actually want that outlawed. So is what Bernie's calling Medicare for all, is that similar to what you guys have there? Is that, if you know anything about his plan?
That's my understanding of it. Yeah, I mean, I've researched that. I've done my own podcast episode on that very thing, basically issuing a warning and saying, is this the Medicare for all future that Americans want, and explaining some of the details of the healthcare system over here. I think it is. I think it's very similar. And as you say, I think it's Bernie Sanders who's talking about getting rid of insurance altogether. I think some of the others are talking about maybe some kind of hybrid scheme. But it's bizarre. It goes back to what you said earlier about people sort of rolling over and accepting things. In surveys done in the UK, one of the top things that comes up when British people are asked, what are you most proud of about the UK? The health service comes up there, but it's in a state of disarray, I think, again, it's one of those things that unless you've had direct experience of it, if you work in it, or if you've had to go through it, that opinion would rapidly change. But I think to most people who are just, swallowing the mainstream story, it's free, which obviously it's not. People don't look past that to start with. And it's wonderful and these guys are great. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing against the staff. It's got nothing to do with the staff and the skills and the willingness and the altruism of the staff. Of course, got nothing to do with that. It's about how it's managed and how government intervenes. Because they're low paid and because they're overworked, they're having to do other jobs to fund it. Quite often they don't attract the talent in the health service. So ironically, what they do in some cases is they take your money as a taxpayer, they give it to the National Health Service. The National Health Service doesn't have the staff because it's not paying them enough or it's not attracting them enough. So then the National Health Service then takes that money, in some cases, for certain specialist areas, it takes that money and it buys private health consultants to come in. So if that's not, government overreach and intervention, I don't know what is. Why take my money, run it through government hands, lose a portion there through bureaucracy, hand it to the National Health Service, lose another portion there. They then give it to the private, provider of the healthcare who's charging the top whack because obviously, they'll do whatever they can to generate profits directly from the government in that way. Why get involved? Step out of the way, So yeah, I don't. I think it's pretty obvious, but yeah, I don't think it's a good system at all. I just don't think it's it's a classic example of intervention and how it can go wrong when too many parties try and get involved in the way get in the way of it.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of there's been stories told of the old Soviet Union. Of course, they've got the calculation issue because they can't figure out prices. And so they would actually order Sears or look in like the old Montgomery Ward magazines and catalogs from the U.S. to determine what things should be priced. So even then they were in their own weird way consulting private corporations. Let me ask you this. You've detailed a lot of the problems with the healthcare system there. Will this, I almost hate calling it a pandemic, but will this pandemic expose more of the problems to where it could put you guys down the road to fixing or fixing this issue of government-run healthcare? Or do you think you're too entrenched right now to even talk about that kind of stuff publicly?
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly highlighting the issues, but the issues have been known for years, for decades. It's been known that it's it's underfunded, it's understaffed. It's just widely known. It's one of the kind of pillars. Not to me, but to many people, it's one of the pillars of sort of British institution, if you like. I don't think they're ever going to try and break it down or remove it or put it back in the hands of private corporations and try and step out of the way. I don't ever see that happening. But what this what this situation does with COVID-19 is it severely highlights the state of the system, the state of the health system, and what needs to be done to bolster it. I mean, the fact that they literally put out a call yesterday, as I say, volunteers, 250,000 volunteers stepped forward overnight. Less than 24 hours, 250,000 people have stepped forward and say, yeah, I want to help the health service. So, it should be sending a message. And this is my hope for this period. And I know it can be difficult, can be challenging to try and find light and hope in this time. But my hope is it does at least highlight the issues that have been caused by government rather than looking to government for solutions. Many people now turning to government, oh, please help me, please hand me down money from the gods. It's like the $1,200 they're talking about in the States. Oh, how are you going to spend your $1,200, your 1,200 Trump box, and what are you going to spend your money on, that you get? Well, many people just don't even think about that it's your money to begin with. They've stolen half of your money at least in taxation. They're giving you basically a breadcrumb back, and people are dancing in the streets like, oh, thank you for saving us, And meantime, whilst all this is going on, obviously the government's screwing up the economy even more, amping it up with even more debt, creating low interest rates, which mean people can't save. So it's encouraging people to get into more debt, businesses to start projects which they can't sustain, building that bubble up even more. It's just crazy. So you can only hope that, the time that people have away from their job and away from, the world, I guess, that they have time to actually reflect on what's important to them and maybe take a look and start to wake up to the power of government and the ill that it can do if it goes left unchecked.
What are the gun laws there like? You probably know over here, at least especially in my state, there's a bit of a reputation for being gun lovers. And sometimes when things like this hit us, the ammo and the supply of guns starts to dwindle quite quickly at the at the gun stores. And it's funny. It's the gun dealer's best friend usually would be a Democratic president, because when Obama got elected, of course, there was a run on guns. And then once Trump got elected, the supply just kind of sat stagnant. I almost think the gun dealers want to hope for a Democrat to get elected, but that's a separate issue. Right. What are the gun laws there like?
Well, I'm going to walk you through what you need to do to get a gun in the UK, okay? This will probably make your jaw drop, I would imagine. Now, first off, you can't buy a handgun in the UK. You can't buy an assault rifle. You can buy a shotgun. So I'm going to use a shotgun as an example. Now, if you want to buy a shotgun, there's just a couple of steps to go through. Firstly, you need to complete an application form, which needs to have a passport photograph. You need 2 referees on this application form. So 2 professionals, either a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor, needs to sign this and say that you're fit to apply. You're still only applying at this stage to get a shotgun. You then send that application off. This will trigger a visit from the police. The police will come around to your house. They will interview you and ask you a number of questions to decide whether or not you are going to get this firearm. They will also consult your doctor's records, and they will also consult your criminal record to see if you've got any criminal record. If all of that goes through and they think that you're not some kind of madman, they will grant you the license. Normally takes about 90 days, 60 to 90 days on average to be granted the license. You'll pay the fee of $120. You now have a shotgun. It doesn't stop there. You need to keep the shotgun in a gun cabinet, which must be lockable, and it needs to be secured at 4 points to a solid brick wall.
Wow.
Okay. The ammunition needs to be kept separate to the gun, also under lock and key. The key for the gun cabinet must be itself stored in a separate safe.
Wow.
You cannot tell anybody the location or the access code to the gun safe. So you cannot tell anybody where the key is, or if it's a combination lock, you cannot tell anybody else. And if you do all of that, you're able to own a shotgun for 5 years. The license needs to be applied for review every 5 years. And I believe during that 5 years, you could be visited by the police again to verify that you're doing all of this stuff. So as you can see, it's very, very easy to get a weapon in the UK. So you can imagine if an intruder broke into your house, the situation that might entail if you were to follow these rules. Sorry, could you just wait a second? I just need to go and get the first key from over there so they can open this over here, go back and get the ammunition from over, it's going to take you half an hour to be ready for this intruder, in which time he's, already pillaged the entire house and whatever. So, yeah, it's completely over the top. There really isn't a way that you can defend yourself in the UK with a firearm. If you apply for a firearm and say you're doing it for self-defense, you would probably receive a very unwelcome visit from the police. It's not a justifiable reason for a license. It's really only for hunting or sports. Even when the Olympics came to the UK in 2012, they had to do the shooting events on military ground because it was against the law for these types of target rifles to be used in areas that weren't set aside for military. So it's insane. I mean, I've looked into this, obviously, once I've got into the, libertarianism and trying to, make myself aware of my rights and, how I can defend myself. There's not really much that I can do to defend my home. I can't even buy pepper spray. Pepper spray is illegal in the UK.
Wow.
Pretty much the only type of spray that I could find, and I didn't even buy it because it's an absolute joke, is UV spray. And all this does is basically may as well just be water. It doesn't do any damage or harm, but it sprays the perpetrator with UV dye so that if they happen to walk into a police station and near one of the UV lamps, the police will know that they've been sprayed with UV dye. So, yeah, pretty much the only thing you can do in the UK to defend yourself is buy a crossbow. It's medieval protection only. You can have an axe, you can have knives, you can have a crossbow, and of course, yeah, you can get a firearm. But as I say, the hoops to jump through and everything else make it, as they intend, obviously, almost pointless.
Is there a gun rights? I mean, that almost sounds weird, probably saying it over there because there is no Second Amendment to the Constitution. But is there a gun rights movement at all there? A push to break down these kind of restrictive laws? No, there isn't. Not that I'm aware of. Not to my knowledge, I should say. I mean, there is a large number of people, the shooting community that go out, particularly here in Scotland, go shooting grouse and all this kind of thing. The countryside kind of alliance type people. But I've certainly never encountered any kind of pro-gun movement. And over here, the basic kind of summation over here is that guns equals bad. Okay.
Guns equals bad. Americans are knotters. They're absolute whack jobs. Why are they doing all that stuff? Why do they even need guns? And it goes back to what we said right at the outset. There's just this inbuilt rolling over and resignation of doing what the state tells you, really, and just believing everything that they say is in your best interest. So yeah, it's kind of, as I say, when I tell these, I want to say not stories because they're factually based, but when I recount these things to my US audience, they're normally jaws drop sufficiently, and that's really what I try to do with the information that I put out on my podcast is to almost fire a warning shot from over here as to how bad things can get, so that you guys over in the States can kind of see where it might eventually go, because I'm pretty sure the US looks to the UK on a number of issues, particularly, when it comes to infringing against rights and liberties. I mean, take the kind of NSA type stuff, surveillance. Over here in the UK, we have this full tank system, as they call it. Every piece of digital data in the UK is stored and recorded. Everything. Literally everything anybody does anywhere in this country, online or on their phone, is stored. And I know other countries are looking at that and thinking, well, that's something that we want, So this is what I try and do. I try and say, look how bad it is over here, for an informative point of view and sometimes a kind of entertaining point of view, but also as a warning shot to see, look, this could be the kind of thing that your government's thinking about doing down the line.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was a good point you just touched upon, because a lot of the left-leaning people here in the States, particularly the politicians, do, I think, look towards Europe in general and the UK as like this is what our healthcare could look like, and they use it as kind of a model. Interestingly, though, when the Brexit thing happened, that's not the model they wanted, and I kept hearing the people that are voting for that are ill-informed, they're racist, they're trying to close the borders, they don't like Muslims. That was the stupid people. We don't want to look to them now, and that wasn't a good idea of what we're supposed to be like here in the States all of a sudden. What was the Brexit thing like? Because we, like I mentioned, we hear a lot of stereotypes of why it happened. What was it like from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to kind of put your finger on what happened there. I mean, I think that the country woke up after that referendum and was just like, what the hell happened? I mean, there's multiple theories about what actually went down. You know, that it was kind of a finger up against government generally, that it was a finger up against Cameron, you know, the prime minister at the time specifically, or that it was this kind of xenophobic rising up of, let's keep everything British and keep the foreigners out. My gut feel is I don't believe, and again, it's just a guess because, you know, I can't interview everybody that voted in that referendum. It's just a guess that it was largely an anti kind of foreigner type movement that helped sway it. I don't know that. Obviously, it's just my gut feel from talking to people, from obviously living here all my life for whatever it is now, 46 years. There is a very there's a large number of people in this country who resent people from Europe coming in, and as they say, the whole stereotype, taking jobs and all this kind of stuff. It is real. That is real. It is a real thing that you can almost sense on the street, and I've heard people say it. I know a lot of people that feel that way. And I guess ultimately it was probably a combination of all of these things. I know from a libertarian point of view, it'd be great to think that this was we want less government and we want to secede. And I don't see that happening. I'm sure there were some people that voted for it on that basis. But I think mainly, you know, the likes of you and I, you know, we're informed, we delve beyond the headlines, you know, we research things, we study things, we don't take mainstream media at red. We're a dying breed, you know, most people are not like us. Most people, you know, buy a newspaper, turn on the headlines on the favorite TV channel, watch 5 minutes, and then they're back on to whatever they're doing. You know, they're not studying all the ins and outs of what does Europe mean and what does it mean from a trade point of view, and you know, does it mean this in terms of government overreach? You know, most people are just making snap decisions. They're not that involved, I don't feel, in politics in this way. I mean, I was speaking to my brother-in-law about this, and he was saying, but I don't believe that. You know, surely everybody would have studied and would know, you know, the implications of trade, and if this happens, and they would have looked into the history. And I'm like, no, most people don't do that, you know. I mean, even in the US, it's like, is it not like 50% of people don't even vote? You know, right. Politics is not on the radar of everybody. They don't even get involved in it. So to expect that they're going to take all the data on board and look at history and repercussions of a decision, to many people, I feel it was do we want, you know, Europeans being part of this country, or do we want to try and make it on our own and be best of British? And I think many people took it as a vote in that way. I don't think all of them did, but it's certainly, I know there's a lot of people in the UK that feel that way. Combined with the dissatisfaction with the government at the time, I think those two things combined to make the vote the way it was. But I don't feel it would be awesome if it were the case, and it could be. I'm only guessing. It would be awesome if it were the case that this was a finger up to government as a whole, and we want less government, and less government is great. But I really don't see that as being the majority of the votes that were cast.
Is there a push now at all for Scotland to break away from the United Kingdom?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, they've been obviously looking for that for a long time, and now that now that the Brexit's gone through, that it's back on the table. It's given them the reason to want to move forward and do that again. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out, and obviously everything's taken a back burner. I mean, I think it's the chief Brexit negotiator for the UK has got coronavirus at the moment. So even even they've been hit, and all that's ground to a halt, as well as most of everything else of everyday life at the moment.
I want to switch to basically the way that you made so much money, but not to get too personal or specific, but I know you are big on being your own boss, being self-sufficient financially, and of course, then you're safe when you're quarantined at home. Give me your elevator pitch for being financially free, so to speak, and how do you kind of want to explain that to your average person that might be kind of stuck or SOL without making money right now?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I started my own business 20 years ago, and it was a decision. It was a push decision rather than a pull decision, if you see what I mean. So it wasn't something that I was drawn towards. I was pushed away from employment because I hated it. I went through university and I got this job with Mobil, as it was then, now ExxonMobil, world's largest company. I was put on their sort of fast track graduate program. And I hated it. The job sucked. It was, I was seeing people there that were just hanging on to retirement. They were creating work out of thin air that didn't really exist. There was so much politics. They were backward in terms of taking up technology and the internet, which I was all about back then. I just thought, this is not for me. I can't do the corporate thing. I can't be this tiny cog in this huge machine and not make a difference. So it kind of pushed me just to get out of there and start my own thing, which initially was not about money. However, obviously once I'd made that jump, it had to be about money, because when I left, I was on a very good salary with ExxonMobil, and I went from there to a fraction of that with my internet business. So I very quickly needed to find a way to at least get back to, percentage of my salary, half or 3/4 or whatever, so I could survive and pay off the debts that I had. But yeah, financial freedom it is a huge thing, but it's kind of meaningless. It's a very bizarre thing. I have been fortunate, as you've said. I've made millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars personally. I've got a lot banked. I have properties without mortgages and so on. And obviously, it does have the obvious, positive implications of, being able to go on holidays and buy things that you like and, all that kind of stuff. But for me, the most interesting part of it all is the freedom that it gives you to explore what you can do and how you can contribute and who you can become in ways that don't even need money. It's kind of bizarre, but until you've got to a level of income where you don't have to worry about it, it's only then that you can really start to focus on the things in life that really matter. And I think this is, without trying to get too deep, I think it's part of the trap that government tries to put you in, is getting you on this hamster wheel. You've got to go and pay all, you've got to go and earn this money. You've got to do this job to pay your way, to pay the taxes on your property that you bought. Even if you bought a house outright, you still need to pay money on it. So even I'm renting, even though I'm mortgage free, in this house that was whatever, $500,000. No, sorry, $800,000, 500,000 UK. Even though I've paid this outright and bought it in cash, I'm still paying every year the government taxes to live here. So they kind of have you in this trap that if you don't work and you don't go out and keep earning, then obviously you're not going to be able to pay their taxes. So until you get to that level of income where you don't have to worry about that, you don't have time, you don't have mental space to actually think about the important things of, what am I doing with my life? What do I actually want to do? What do I want to achieve here? What am I trying to become? What do I want to leave behind? What's my legacy? What am I trying to say with what I'm doing? Where am I heading? You don't have time to do all this stuff. You're too busy working to try and pay the bills and keep the wolves from the door, which is only right and only natural. And the government makes that very, very difficult because they tax you out of the wazoo for everything. Obviously, an income tax and, state tax and, tax whenever you buy anything, fuel tax, we know the drill, right? So if we kept the money that we earned without tax, we'd be in a position to sort of sit back and realize the game, and step away from that and realize that we don't need to be doing this. So it's kind of a bizarre thing. I don't want to sell it as this huge dream that solves all of life's problems, because obviously it doesn't. It makes life a lot easier, of course. As you said, in lockdown, I mean, I could literally, I don't know, I could probably go years at the moment without working or earning, just, whittling away at the savings that I've got. Fortunately, because my business is purely online, this lockdown has zero effect on my business. In fact, my way of life is very unchanged at the moment, as it is normally, apart from the ability to get outside. I can't get outside quite as often as I normally do. So yeah, it doesn't solve all of life's problems. It makes things a lot easier. But I think the biggest thing that it enables you to do is it gives you the freedom of time and mental space to actually step off that treadmill and think, where am I heading and what do I actually want to do here? Until you get out of that race and that game, you don't have time. And as I say, ironically and paradoxically, you kind of come to the realization that all of the money that you've gathered to get to this point has very little impact on your kind of happiness or overall quality of life. And, there's been studies made that show exactly the same. Lottery winners, there's a little spike of happiness when they first get it, and they revert back within 12 months to the level they were before, whatever they were doing. And it's the same, if you earn, there's a difference between obviously earning $0 a year and $30,000 a year in terms of happiness levels. But after that, there's very little difference. And again, studies have been done to show that. So you kind of need to generate that level of income that removes all the worry, to be able to realize that actually it's not that important. Obviously, it is important when you need to put food on the table. I'm not saying that. But beyond that, once you get to a point where you're comfortable, it doesn't really make that much difference.
I'm guessing that being a voice of liberty and a libertarian podcaster is not quite as common over there as it is here in the States. Is there a liberty movement over there? And what got you into this?
There is a small liberty movement. I mean, I've done a bit of research to try and find people. I know there's another guys in Scotland, actually, Scottish Liberty, I think they're called. I'm going to have to connect with them. I just heard about them a few days ago. So yeah, there's a small movement. Most people that I talk to do not even know what libertarianism is. They literally have not heard the word. It's not like in the US where you've had these guys go on TV, the Ron Pauls and so on, actually putting a face to the party and so on. It just doesn't exist. I mean, there is a libertarian party here, but it's certainly never received television coverage as far as I know. But it does exist. It's a very, very underground movement from what I can tell. And as I say, I've heard of one other podcaster in the UK that's doing this. In terms of how I got into it, I was introduced to Tom Woods. I'm sure that I'm good friends with Tom. We've done a lot of business together on the internet for the past 2 or 3 years. We've launched products together. He kind of introduced me to a lot of this stuff, obviously listening to his podcast. And then just under a year ago, I was hijacked on one of my live streams that I was doing about business by a bunch of libertarians who started ranting and raving about taxation being theft and so on my live stream on Facebook, which was hilarious. And I was giving it back to them as good as they gave it to me. And we were all having a good laugh. And I connected with a few of them on a personal level and started investigating even more. And really the tipping point for me was actually when my dad passed away last year. He was a school teacher all his life, so he didn't have a high-paying job, but he worked as a teacher for 40 years. And he managed to save something in the order of about it would be $600,000 US, just on a teacher's salary. This money that he'd saved was all done investments. Obviously, he'd already been taxed on his salary, and he'd taken that money that had already been taxed, he'd invested it for his own future and for his family as an inheritance. And the government, when he died, took, I think it was $180,000 right off the top of that back into their own pockets. And that was just the final straw to me. That was like, okay, something needs to happen here. I need to be a bit more proactive to shed light on this and try and turn more people onto this. So, that was when I started being more proactive and setting up Facebook groups and pages and memes and, just early this year starting the podcast.
Wow. Okay. Let me ask you this. Do you think, I almost feel strange asking this, it does seem like there are more clampdowns on liberty coming. What do you see in the near future here with this corona mess? And do you think the liberty that you do have might be clamped down upon further?
Yeah, I think it will. I definitely think it will. I'm not trying to scaremonger. I just think they're leaving room for maneuver. They're kind of leaving wiggle room over here. Every announcement they make is always followed with we may introduce further stricter measures if required. They say that every single time. Every time you think it can't get any worse, they end the briefing with, if you guys don't do what we're telling you here, we may introduce stricter measures. And they said it last time after the kind of lockdown announcement. So, yeah, I think it's coming. I mean, at the moment, we can leave the house once a day. I don't think that's going to be in place forever. I think they will probably move to no exercise and that you can only leave the house for medical supplies and food is my guess as to what will happen next. In the UK, I would guess it would be the same in the US in some states, depending on the spread of the virus, because they're looking to countries that are supposedly 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the curve. If we look to Italy, if we look to France, if we look to Spain, in France you need paperwork to leave the house. You've got to go on the government website. You have to print off a document, and you have to take this document with you, and it needs to be signed, and you need to have ticked the box before you leave the house as to why you're leaving. They've already fined thousands and thousands of people in France that don't have that document. I've heard of them requiring a receipt. If you've been food shopping or you've got medicine, you need to prove that, otherwise you'll get fined. So, yeah, I think it will increase. Whether or not it's justified is debatable. To me, the main issue here and the bigger threat is what's going on beneath the headlines, that's got nothing to do with coronavirus. Like the bill that they're passing in the US at the moment. They spoke today about a digital currency. They just snuck that through. On any other day, that would probably be the headline of the week or the month or the year. US to move towards a digital currency. What the hell? But it's been snuck through. How long have they been sitting on that? And they're putting it through right now to do with coronavirus. Obviously, the economic so-called stimulus that puts us in more debt. They're also in the US tabling a bill at the moment, as we speak, to get backdoor access to end-to-end encryption. So this is any messages you send on Facebook and WhatsApp and Twitter, for example, they want a backdoor given. They've been after this for years, of course, with all these high-profile cases against Apple, FBI versus Apple, let us get into your phones. They didn't find any headway there, so now they're using the conduit of child abuse and saying, well, look, guys, if you... Facebook, for example, if you don't give a backdoor so we can search everything and monitor everything, anybody that posts any child abuse images, we're holding you as a company responsible and not the individual. At the moment, it's the individual and not the vehicle or the company that's responsible. And what's happening at the moment is these companies are self-monitoring. They're searching and doing their own searches to find this material and reporting it to the authorities, quite rightly. However, if the US government gets its way, and again, they're tabling this right now. Why they would do this right now if coronavirus is so bad, and why have they got time to be focusing on this? Who knows? But if the US government gets their way, they will have a backdoor to be able to monitor all of these messages themselves and basically get a warrant to ask the companies to search specific people's accounts. The downside of this, I know we're going slightly off topic here, but I just want to really clarify what's going on here. If they do that, and they say in this example, they get a warrant to give a warrant to Facebook and say, you've got to search this guy's account, Facebook is then acting as a government agent. And that goes against the Constitution. Okay, so you need a warrant to do that. At the moment, because it's a private business, you don't need a warrant. Private business can do what it likes in terms of searching data. You've agreed to that when you joined Facebook. But if a government gets Facebook to do it, Facebook is now an agent of the government and therefore needs to issue a warrant. So what they're saying is it's not even going to be effective. So it's a whole ruse of using this child abuse thing, this bill that's been passed. They call it the Earn It bill, is basically their attempt to say, look, if you don't do this, Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp and everyone else, any bad stuff that happens on your network, we're holding you responsible. So this is the kind of stuff that they're passing right now. This is the kind of stuff that they're putting on the table. As everybody's looking at coronavirus, this is the kind of stuff that they're doing behind the scenes. And that is where the worry is for me. It's not about the lockdown, the quarantine, whether or not it's justified, I don't know. It's not going to last forever. It's a power play, of course. It obviously says, we're in charge, you do what we say. There's obviously that side of it. But to my mind, the bigger issue is what's going on that's got nothing to do with coronavirus, that all the bills that are going through beneath the headlines that would make it to headline news any other day currently are just getting buried and passed through. And that, to me, is where the big concern is.
Yeah, they never want to let a tragedy or a moment of panic go to waste, for sure. Before I ask you about your website and your podcasts, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask someone in Scotland, what's the best scotch, in your opinion?
I don't drink. I've been teetotal for, what is it now? Probably 13 years, I think. I never was a big whiskey drinker. I did used to like Macallan, but that's probably pretty mainstream. I mean, there's some really good little independent whiskey places here in the UK. I'm trying to think back in the day. I'm trying to cast my mind back here. I think there's one called Black Isle, which I used to drink, which is quite nice, quite a smoky one, I believe.
Wow, a non-Scotch drinker and a libertarian in Scotland. You are almost one of a kind, I bet.
Well, I'm English as well, so I'm kind of, I'm the complete definition of outlier and outsider. Yeah. I could not be more bonkered and hunkered down here.
The black sheep. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, tell my listeners about your podcast, your website, and where they can find you online.
Cool. So yeah, if you want to check out my podcast, I do it Monday through Friday. We cover all kinds of issues, obviously government overreach, any kind of liberty infringements. I look to current events and see what's happening behind the headlines. I also talk about entrepreneurship as well. You can find that over at michaelcheneyshow.com, michaelcheneyshow.com.
Excellent. I will link to that in the show notes page for this episode, of course. Michael Cheney, thank you for being here with us.
You are most welcome. It's a pleasure.
What a good, enjoyable chat that was. Thank you, Michael, for doing that with us. I will be on Michael's show, the Michael Cheney Show, in a few weeks. So you guys go give him a listen, and I think you'll dig what he does. As for us, you can find us on Facebook.com/Death to Tyrants podcast. Follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. Let's see, I got a Patreon you can donate to if you'd like. Patreon.com/Death to Tyrants. And once more, I got to tell you this, if you're thinking about joining the Libertarian Party, and just knowing that we have a link dedicated to listeners of Death to Tyrants to join the LP, if that would make you do it, well, guess what? You're in luck, and so am I. We've got a link, lp.org/Death to Tyrants. So go up there and sign up. And we got some conventions coming up. But do we? I don't know what it's going to look like. Is it going to be the Libertarian National Convention by remote location? Who knows? We shall see. Anyways, thank you guys for being here once again. Like I said, the next few episodes will focus on different aspects of this wild, wild moment we're living through. Until next week, have a good one.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.